My name is Isabel Brown, and I grew up in Evergreen, Colorado, just down the road. I'm so happy to be joining you here in Denver at the 2023 Western Conservative Summit. I've been coming every year since I was a college student at CSU in 2018. Go Rams, although they might not want me to say that. They've kind of disavowed me the last several years. And I'm so excited to be here tonight to introduce the winner of the 2023 Under 30 Speech Contest, which, as mentioned, I was the happy recipient of in the year 2019. Since I joined you on the stage last year, in 2022, the world has only continued changing at the speed of light, hasn't it? Women of the year are almost always men. Mothers are no longer mothers, but birthing people, according to our federal government, or people with a uterus, or even chest feeders, which I hear a lot these days on social media. In the wake of Roe v. Wade's historic overturning last summer, thank goodness for that, Planned Parenthood has switched up their business strategy to become the largest provider of hormone therapy to teenagers with zero diagnosis of gender dysphoria or a signed letter from a therapist at all. As you all know, if you live here in Colorado, crime rates have absolutely skyrocketed, making Colorado the hub of violent crime and car theft and property crime around the nation. Marriage rates are at the lowest they've ever been since America began recording marriage rates in 1867. And for those who overcome the hurdle and decide to get married, half are statistically projected to end in divorce. Our economy is in the toilet, thanks Joe Biden, and we're much more obsessed with sending billions of dollars overseas to the Taliban than protecting our own borders. When you think about it that way, it's hardly surprising then that only 16% of my generation, Gen Z, those of us born in 1997 down to 2012, would say that we are proud to be Americans. But I don't say that to freak you out or to make you cringe or suddenly have an existential crisis about what we're doing here at the Western Conservative Summit. Instead, in the midst of the absolute chaos and pandemonium we live through daily, I see nothing but hope in my generation taking the reins to drive us into the future in the 2020s and beyond. The truth is, really none of us, but particularly young adults looking for hope and a purpose and something to strive for in our future, none of us are proud of the America that we live in today. None of us are proud that we should be eating lab-grown meat instead of supporting the American agricultural industry. None of us like to see Chinese spy balloons float across the country with absolutely zero consequences for foreign espionage, while our own FBI spies on Catholics going to Mass every Sunday, calling us violent domestic extremists. None of us want to see a next generation who 21% of whom are struggling with identifying themselves as LGBTQ+. None of us want to see the family eroded or our faith replaced with atheism. Instead, we are absolutely hell-bent on fighting for a future America we can be proud of again. I've noticed a lot lately that our American culture is obsessed with great storytelling, and I'm sure that the Western Conservative Summit here this weekend is going to reinstill amazing storytelling through our theme this year of Western Strong. But especially within the lens of the entertainment industry, we eat great stories up and we binge them as often as we can, usually about young, countercultural, punk rock heroes and heroines who courageously risk everything to fight against the establishment older generation seeking to destroy a hope for the future. The Hunger Games narrated a powerful story of a teenage girl who overthrew an authoritarian dictatorial government in a post-democratic America. Katniss Everdeen's courageous defiance of her predecessors sparked the fury of a nation longing for freedom and basic human rights. And while most in her parents' generation were too afraid of the danger that was sure to accompany a fight against the government, it was a young warrior willing to stand for truth who led the path to victory against an all too powerful regime. Harry Potter, my personal favorite, my parents would tell you, spent way too much time with my nose in a Harry Potter book growing up, was an infant the first time that he defeated the powerful and feared Lord Voldemort. And through his education at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, it was 3 children, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, who led the front lines of the fight against Voldemort and the evil Death Eaters, while most wizards and witches, including the powerful government of the Ministry of Magic, by the way, cowered in fear. And by the time they dropped out of school during their final year, it was these teenagers who were able to defeat the greatest dark wizard of all time and restore peace to the wizarding world. How about any Star Wars fans in the house? The original trilogy, obviously. None of this new nonsense. Luke Skywalker was only 19 years old in Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, when he joined forces with Han Solo, Chewbacca, R2-D2, and C-3PO to defeat the evil Empire's unprecedented planet-destroying weapon, the Death Star. And while the generation preceding them witnessed the downfall of the Jedi Order and the rise of the totalitarian empire, it was the young Rebel Alliance that ultimately was successful in finding victory over the dark side of the Force. These stories are obsessive, and we can never get enough of them, which is why we have what number of installments of new Star Wars trilogies? Apparently they're making a new one, which I pray that they just let go now, trust me. But they feel far away and disconnected from reality, something that we can escape to inside of a screen in a very scripted world to tune out the noise and the chaos and the pandemonium around us in our uncertain world, because we safely assume that we're going to watch a happy ending gloss our screens. Victory over the dystopian authoritarianism our eyes are glued to for hours on end, and we count down the days until we can watch a different variation of the exact same story. But what I'm realizing that we as a society fail to realize is that we are living through the exact same upside-down, corrupt government, anti-freedom storyline in real life. And instead of empowering the young, countercultural, punk rock, patriot, anti-establishment fighters to save the day, young heroes to save the day, those in power, especially in the conservative movement, are far too often chastising my generation for being stupid, lazy. You get the picture. Last year, I asked you to shout out a few words that came to mind when you heard the words Gen Z, and I'd be curious to ask you the same question this evening. Don't be shy, shout it out. Screenager, that's a good one. It's a really good one. Ooh, I heard a lot. Energetic is a great one. Basement, I hear that one a lot. Lazy, can't move out of mom and dad's house, entitled. Prodigies, that's interesting, I like that one a lot. But I usually hear the negative connotation of when we ask people to describe young people in America. And I always love to encourage both this Western Conservative Summit audience and many other groups that I have the privilege of speaking to understand that it is this generation, this end of life as we know it, this end of the alphabet in Generation Z, which I don't find to be coincidental whatsoever, that must take opportunities for leadership. We must take opportunities to empower them, because America and freedom as we know it has relied on young, countercultural, punk rock, anti-establishment patriots, just like our favorite movies, books, and television shows throughout all of history to bring this crazy experiment into the next generation. I shared with you last year, to the surprise of many, and if you are new, maybe you don't know this, that when I ask high schoolers and college students to describe what the founding fathers of America looked like, I usually get the same answer. And I think it comes from the illustrations in our AP US history textbooks or the statues and monuments that we see in Washington, D.C. But when I ask the average teenager in America today, how would you describe those who founded our country, I'm always confronted with 3 words: old white men. Not that there's anything wrong inherently with being an old white man, but this lie has been allowed to flourish, to grow, and to be used as an excuse for why America is inherently evil. But in reality, even before America was officially the United States of America, before we had ever declared our independence from Britain or fought a bloody revolutionary war to bring us to where we are today having this conversation, it was those same courageous young rebels willing to risk everything to bring freedom into the next generation. On July 4th, 1776, James Monroe was only 18 years old. Aaron Burr was only 20. Alexander Hamilton, before having a Broadway smash hit musical named after him, which is absolutely fantastic, was only 21 years old on July 4th, 1776. James Madison was 25, and Thomas Jefferson, who established the entire concept of our nation's governing documents and the idea that we are one nation under God, was only 33 years old on July 4th, 1776. This isn't even applicable to just the United States, but think of every great human story throughout history. Before them, 2,000 years ago, it was young countercultural fishermen and tax collectors who courageously left everything behind to follow Jesus Christ in defiance of the most powerful religious institutions on the face of the earth with the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. It was a teenager asked by the Archangel Gabriel to carry Jesus into the world, a teenager from Nazareth. And I was very fortunate to spend much time in the Holy Land last year, including making a documentary about Jerusalem. But if you've ever been to Nazareth, there's not much to talk about there. It was a teenager in David who slayed Goliath, and throughout all of human history, God has been raising up young, courageous rebels willing to fight with everything they have to bring our values and liberty itself forward for the next generation. I believe America has a decision to make today. And more specifically, the conservative movement has a decision to make today about whether or not we want our movement to continue into the next generation and every generation thereafter. Ronald Reagan is famous for saying freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. And we love to repeat that quote as conservatives, don't we? But if we really think about the definition of that word, extinction, this conversation might not have the privilege of taking place for the Western Conservative Summit 2024 or 2030 or 2050 if we neglect our responsibility to give a platform to the next generation. As a 26-year-old content creator and political commentator, I am far too often told by others that I am too young to speak my mind. I'm too young to challenge the narrative, and I'm certainly too young to make a difference. That I need to sit down and wait my turn until I have enough life experience, whatever that's supposed to mean, to take on a leadership position in our conservative movement. This polished, outdated view that far too many conservatives have embraced for far too long, I believe is a mistake. Thankfully, not a mistake that's embraced or repeated by those in my generation, or thankfully by those at the Western Conservative Summit. In the last few months, I've heard an awful lot about Gen Z being the end of America. And I'm sure when I introduced myself, there were some cringes in the audience about one of those crazy Gen Zers coming to talk to us tonight. We are the end of the alphabet, not coincidentally, in my opinion. And sure, maybe we are the end of life as we know it in America. But when life as we know it is the absolute insanity that we live through today, I think it's damn time that we fight on offense for a future America that we are proud to call home again. Believe it or not, Gen Z is leading that charge. We are rejecting 4-year undergraduate degrees in lesbian underwater basket weaving and instead embracing entrepreneurship. In fact, 62% of us have already started our own businesses. We're embracing traditional values, politically, culturally, and even religiously, with Gen Z shockingly favoring the Latin Mass as their favorite church service far over any other generation. We're getting married younger. We're normalizing homeschooling culturally in America. We're rejecting modern feminism. We're throwing out our birth control. And believe it or not, we are even voting more conservatively over time, with more Gen Zers voting for Republican policies and candidates in 2020 than 2018, and in 2022 than 2020. There are so many other cultural fronts that we are fighting on offense courageously for that you will never hear about on cable television or in traditional political circles. But I am here to tell you today that I am unbelievably proud of the Western Conservative Summit and their continued promise to uplift the next generation and give Gen Z a platform of leadership, knowing that a happy ending is not guaranteed for the future of America, that this conversation might be extinct, free from a Hollywood script or another season or another trilogy that I'm sure they will botch in some way, shape, or form over at Disney now that they own Star Wars. But imagine if everyone in the conservative movement did the same in uplifting and empowering this courageous punk rock countercultural generation that we desperately need just as much today in 2023 as we did in 1776.